By the government's trade-off to escape a House of Commons destruction on Brexit has been discarded as inappropriate by Guideline Insurgent Dominic upset. Theresa May had confident largest mob, who wish MPs to include the definitive say, to behind her in a key voice on Tuesday overnight by giver them assurances. But the formulation of the pledged trade-off has now been published. Mr. Upset, who had negotiations on Thursday in Ministers, told he could not know why the changing was done. Mr. Upset told he had been implicated in negotiations for 2 days or, at the end of the trial thing was unaccountably modified, that had not been coordinated. This by the government has done the movement unamendable, opposite to the normal methods of the building of House of Commons. And thus it cannot be recognized. He told he would hear to the by the government but added, I expect they hear to me while I say I don't know why thou ve made the recent minute selector. He told the issue was how if the UK achieved this very apocalyptical time wherever no Brexit transactions had been made by previous February 2019, Parliament was not creature proposed the opportunity to say which should occur following, just to mention the stance. Brexiters diamond they weren't consulted on transactions, and Remainers refuged been cheated. All they had was word treaty, quite rather than company obligation, dirty, but one elder MP says, the is fair government out of most. Lawyer General Robert Buckland told he wouldn't get in several Tory psychodrama on if the main secretary had caved in Brexiteers' demands but tense no deals were made and the correction was a true try to discover a way via. And a representative for the division for entering the Europe Association told it ensures how in all occasion Parliament can conduct by the government to expense, time as well enabling by the government to supply on the will of the UK human beings. He added, yet the remnant hypothetic and the by the government is sure we will accept a nice transactions in the EU that Parliament will supporting. The by the government's correction to the EU departure draft sets out which must occur if the main secretary announces up January 21, 2019 how no transactions has been achieved in the EU each on the departure treaty or the next relation. By these occasion, a secretary must do a declaration in Parliament during 14 days and offer MPs an prospect to voice. Yet, the voice would be on a movement in inert regulation, just indicating how the building has deliberate the declaration. Mr. Upset had initially requested the correction to say how the by the government must search the adoption of Parliament for its year of activity, and how ministers must be aimed by MPs and peers. Fair to prudent MPs, Anna Soubry and Ken Clark, elect versus the by the government following lack to be convinced by Mrs. May's trade-off pledge. Ms. Soubry told associate who had coordinated to the trade-off would now sense ill let downward, and she charged Mrs. May of branch in the difficult Brexiters in her side. Aha, so fair to be precise we are now departure to include to correct the unamendable following the coordinated amendable correction purchased a dastardly stinger in the plume. Which a period to be live. Prudent Brexiters reasoned how the by the government must include the definitive say on any Brexit transactions. Labour's dark Brexit Secretariat Sir Keir Starmer told, this by the government's correction is just not nice quite. Theresa May has lost behind on her speech and proposed an correction how conducted the importance out of the significant voice. Parliament cannot, and should not, take he. The draft will now returns to the building of Lords previous following 1 week, in both of the by the government correction and Mr. Upset's unique correction anticipated to be discussed. It will later back to the House of Commons, wherever a crisp showdown is anticipated except a transactions is clogged of. Mr. Upset told the schedule now has got to be to try to put it order. The UK is due to keep the EU in March 2019, and talks include been take location on the regulation of the division and how the two sides will job along in the next. The by the government is hard to undergo a new act, named the EU departure draft, that it says is necessary to provide a sleek and neat Brexit. Its major need are to end the leadership of EU law in the UK, and transmission current EU law in UK law so the identical rules and regulation use on the day following Brexit. But as it passes via Parliament, MPs and peers include been hard to changing it, in several cases bits on how would changing by the government's Brexit policy. These involve moves to offer Parliament more than of a say in the occasion how it votes to deny the transactions jammed among the UK and the EU, or if no transactions is achieved at all. Ministers say they cannot enable MPs to solve which happens following in these occasion, as it would link their hands in talks. But supporters of the go say it would allow Parliament to escape an economically injuring result for the UK. Following the building of Lords modified the draft to offer Parliament a more than crucial tell, MPs elect on Tuesday to inverse the go, but several pro-EU Tories say they detained behind a vote versus the by the government since of promises they were done how their concerns would be heard to. In the building of House of Commons on Thursday night, Labour's Brexit representative Sir Keir Starmer compressed Brexit Secretariat David Davis on outwardly contradictory accounts of which the would-be mob were proposed. Mr. Davis would not be painted on the detailed information, proverb the suggestion would encounter three criteria: how it does not coup the plebiscite outcome, does not erode talks and does not changing the nation's constitution pattern that involves the by the government negotiations.